Hello everyone, it's Jim Lynn here. Welcome to episode 21 of Mr. Lynn's Workshop. This is the second in a series of 3 videos that I made at the Harrogate Woodworking show last month. And in this video, I was talking to Shane and Jaq Skelton of Skelton Saws. I began by asking Jaq how long they've been making saws.
Just over 8 years now.
8 years?
8 years, yeah. So quite a while. Well, Shane, he just wanted to make a saw. He wasn't really bothered about setting up a business or anything. So he made the saw and I thought, actually, this is so good. I think I could turn it into a business.
Right.
And that's how it sort of came about. And we sent it to David Charlesworth, who's one of the most well-known woodworker, really. And we said, if it's good enough for him, then it's good enough, you know, to sell.
I think I've actually used that saw in his workshop because I took the saws you made for me down to him, and we used them in the mortise and tenon course, and he showed me that original one. I think one of the very first ones, wasn't it? It was. I think it's number 4, if I remember rightly.
But yeah, it's the first one that we sent out to anybody. And so he loved it, and we thought, well, this is okay. So we went from there, and we set up the business within probably about 8 weeks, something like that. And we just have kept going. You know, for me, I'd never worked in the woodworking industry before, so I'd never picked up a saw before, so it was something completely new.
So what was the first saw you made? Was that the large handsaw?
No, the first saw we made was a 10-inch dovetail saw with a medallion in. But since then the range has grown and grown. I mean, you can see here, this is our price list, and we've got this many saws and this many saws now.
Plenty to choose from.
Yeah, and for one man that's just making in the garage, that's really quite amazing.
It's just a single car garage.
Yeah,
isn't
it's just a single car garage. I mean, you've been yourself, Jim. You know, and so I do all the everything that's not to do with woodworking or making. I do everything else. So I deal with all.
You've got an excellent Instagram channel, haven't you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
it is. It's really good.
Yeah, I think we've got about 10,000 followers on there now, so that's really good. And I haven't bought any of them, so that's pretty good effort.
So you were saying that Shane's just about to do a demonstration.
Yeah, it's going to do a demonstration about what saw to choose, so for what job, and also about our peacock oil and peacock waxes, a little bit about how to use them and how to put them on and things. So yeah, that's going to be in a second.
Do you want to come a bit closer so you can hear? And then So basically, Skelton Saws, what we do is we make bespoke saws, not saws that you just buy off the peg. So our saws are made to fit. So we measure your hands, you choose the wood, and then it's made for exactly the job you're doing to it. And the idea is that you're buying a tool that's just an extension of your arm. So when you pick it up and use it, it's exactly the same every time. So you're not fighting the tool. So the different sizes of saws that we do, as people look and go, crikey mate, so many, which one should I go for? So this is a carcass saw. The reason a carcass saw gets its name is because it can make every single joint in a piece of carcass furniture. So when you're making the frame, it'll cut everything. So that's the most universal saw, which is the equivalent of someone saying, well, what plane should I buy? And they'll say, well, if you're just starting out, I'd buy a jack plane, because it's not a smoother and it's not a jointer, but it'll smooth and you can joint with it. So this is the middle size saw. The reason it looks so long is all our saws are based on 18th century saws rather than the modern day equivalents. So saws were much finer, but they were longer. So they actually cut faster than a shorter saw, even though they don't give you the tear out as what a coarser saw does. They also have tapered blades. So you can see the blade is deeper at the heel than it is at the toe. And the reason behind that's 2 different reasons. One of them is when you're cutting down to a line, a lot of people then look at the other side of the line and have overshot on the other side. So with the blade being tapered, if you keep the back parallel with your workbench and cut down to the line, you won't overshoot on the other side. You can just look over and correct. The other reason is the saw cuts faster on a tapered blade than if I made that parallel. and that's because you've got the weight of the back, and what happens is as you push that saw forward, the weight of the saw is effectively trying to lift the saw up as it goes over, because it's tapered, which makes each cut that bit more as it goes in. It also lets the wood dust clear quicker as it comes out as well. So it's got two main benefits. The saw handle, there's a lot of geometry that goes on, so a lot of people think, oh, I press down on the saw to make it cut faster, but that's not the case. If a saw is made properly, the angle of the handle, how high that is relation to the back and how deep it is relation to the teeth will make that saw either feel like it glides or feel really rough by not even changing the teeth. Because by this being friction and you pushing at the right angle, automatically, because this is grabbing, creates a downward force for you. So you're not thinking I need to push down with the saw, you just push it backwards and forwards. So if you pick a saw up where all of this is right, without thinking, your finger should point to the centre of the teeth. And it doesn't matter which one you pick up, they're all different size handles, different lengths, but you'll pick them up and think, oh yeah, it does it. Oh, and it's done for a reason. You normally point where you look. So when you're looking at the line centre, that's, so it has a purpose. So this is a traditional 1760 saw, which we reproduce, where nothing's really changed from 1760. It's exactly the same as it was if you'd bought it back then. So if you were a cabinet maker, that, and you went into a saw shop, you asked for what you wanted, and the saw was made for the cabinet maker. Whereas now we're in a world where everything's disposable, everything's just off the peg, you use it, when you're not using it, that's the end of it. So we're sort of harking back to everything being specifically for the task in mind, and that's why we make so many different size saws. But what I've looked to do is look at improving how they made saws back then. So different features that are in this to help hold the back more rigid, hold the blade more rigid. So a saw like this handle is fastened to the back. You can see how the brass goes all the way around. So if that handle over years of use and humidity wants to move, because it's not fastened to the blade, it ain't going to move the blade. The blade stays exactly as it was. So effectively the handle's free floating. Even the bolts that go through don't pass through the blade. It's completely isolated. So with this, a normal traditional folded back, you're basically folding a piece of black brass over, nipping it, and the blade's knocked in. Now that blade now can move. It can move in the handle and the alignment. It can also move when you're using the saw. So the way this works is this is squashed, but it's originally milled first. So that line where the blade sits in is perfect. If you try and fold two bits of steel together and have a perfect straight line, it's near on impossible. So the blade is made slightly curved at the top. It's knocked in, and then under tension it's then pinned front and back. So it's pinned under here and it's pinned here. So nothing's ever going to move. It's not going to come slack while you're using it. And you've always got a proper high tension blade, which is the difference of if you're running a bandsaw and your blade was a little bit slack and then you tighten it up, you can tell the difference when you're passing a piece of wood through it. And it's just the same with a saw. If you haven't got a saw that's tensioned properly, it never feels and sounds as smooth as one that is tensioned properly. So this is just something you don't need to think about. So the tooth patterns, I can cut any tooth. So I do it on a fly press, one tooth at a time. So I can rotate my cutting tool to give any rake angle. I can also alter the spacing to give any teeth per inch as well. And that's something that you can't get off and off the shelf, where you're pretty much stuck that's what we do it in there, the sizes, because they buy this blade in with all the teeth already cut in for them and they guillotine it off, whereas I buy the blade in, cut all the teeth, cut all the, you know, everything's, I don't start with anything, so I'm not governed by what I can get hold of. Like even the saw bolts, everything I turn, you know, they're all done in house. The steel that I use, some Swedish, depends what size that I'm doing it and what sizes they do. What happens with the billet is there's around the world there's only now a handful of mills that'll roll a billet into spring steel, and last year 5 of them shut because of what's been going on. So there's only now there's only a limited few that actually have the machinery to actually roll spring steel now. It's very and the spring steel manufacturers have found that they can now sell to mobile phone companies small bits and make more money. So I don't need all this. So it's again another thing that's dying, you know. So as far as the billets go, the steel will go from Sweden. Some of it is then milled in Germany and distributed that way. So it depends which mill the billets come from and then where it's rolled. There is only now one mill in England. Yeah, there's only one left that rolls spring steel. And what we've done is the 12 thou saw plates that we made. They're all made from English steel, but they are the only ones, you know, that are left doing it. When you're cutting a piece of wood, you ideally want 6 teeth bridging the width of the wood, and that determines how fine or how coarse a saw you want. So if you're cutting, you know, 2-inch stock, you're not going to be using a dovetail saw. Likewise, you're not going to use a coarse saw on cutting thin stock, because rather than it being smooth, it'll be da-da-da-da-da-da as you cut it, and it'll also cause more vibration on a thin bit of wood that you're trying to cut, because you're putting more frequency in the wood with it being coarser. So that's really the teeth per inch explained. The rake angle is how aggressive the tooth attacks the piece of wood. So if you imagine 90 degrees, everything's worked back from 90 degrees. So this saw has a 9 degrees rake angle, so it's 9 degrees relaxed back from vertical. So the compromise is, the more you relax the rake, the smoother the saw is, but the slower it cuts. So there's always a compromise. But if you're using exotic woods, you want a more relaxed rake angle and a finer tooth pattern, because the fibres in the exotic woods are much harder, it's much denser, so you want to be taking nice smooth cuts with it. Whereas if you're using woods like, you know, American cherry and American walnut and things like that, which are still hardwoods, you can get away with more of an aggressive cut and more, you know, less teeth per inch. And that's why a lot of the American made saws are much coarser than a lot of the English saws, because the English saws are more for the English woods and the American saws are more for what they're using out there, which tends to be a bit softer. So when you're ordering a saw, we do say, what's the scale of your work that you're cutting, you know, what you're making, because someone that's making a jewellery box would use a block plane as a jointer. A cabinet maker might use a number 8 plane as a jointer, so they're cutting something huge. So it's all about what scale to what size, you know, what size tool that you want to use. Yeah, we've been making them commercially for just over 8 years now, and we've probably made, I'd say, closer to 700 saws in that time, just on my own, you know. So, you know, we do peacock wax and peacock oils, and they say, you know, why is it called peacock and what's all that about? Our original saws had which we still make, have a medallion with a peacock's head on with an acorn, and my dad's into heraldry, and that's our family crest, so that's where it came from. But the other thing is it shows the beauty in the wood. And what I've found with other finishes that say they're oil-based finishes. I don't like the feel of a lacquer on something. I like to feel that warmth on the wood. The other finishes contain a small amount, that say the finishing oil or Danish oil. They'll have a small amount of varnish mixed in with the oil, mixed in with the carrier, which is normally a high flash point. So what happens is, there's the little bit of oil that does go in the wood, that's then got the varnish behind it. Once that varnish suddenly goes off, no more oil's going to go into that piece of wood because you've now put a barrier with what's gone in. So you don't really get much colour from the wood. Plain pieces of wood suddenly look more exciting. So that's what the finish, you know, they've all had 4 wipes of oil. And that wood, which looks, you know, to me looks amazing, that's the same wood you'd have in your classroom. Yeah. So it's just, that's beech. Normally beech looks horrible. Yeah. But if you put proper stuff on it, it looks lovely. And that's flame beech. Yeah. Yeah, so, and the feel of them, you can feel those.
Oh yeah.
They're just, some of the other oils, you've got a certain length of time. If you don't wipe it off, it's gone off. With this, all you do is you wipe it on the wood and you keep the wood wet for an hour. And then what hasn't gone, you wipe off with a piece of paper towel and you leave it. And then the following day, depending what finish you want. So say we're making a rustic chair, or like a stick chair or something like that, you might just oil it the once, keep it really wet, let it dry, job done. Because you want that rustic satin look to it. But if you want to do that, all I do is do it with 4/0 wire wool. It's just to denib after your first coat, and then just give it another wipe. Do the same thing, leave it half an hour, wipe off what hasn't gone, and you'll see that it starts to build, the depth builds. And after 4 coats, that's what you end up with. And we don't make it as we didn't start thinking, oh, let's make oil to make some money. It's just that all the saw handles that we've ever made have been finished in the oil. And David Barron, that normally demonstrates here, he's got some of our saws. He's like, what do you put on them handles just to feel amazing? We make our own, or you should be selling that, so I'd buy it. And we do, and he does. So the different colours that we do aren't dyes. A lot of people go, oh, well, what's the difference between the clear and the antique and the red or the rich or whatever? It's not I put pigment powder into. What it is it'll highlight any flicks that are in the wood, so it'll give you more contrast. So rather than it just being flat, you can sometimes take a piece of wood that looks fairly flat, that's got a few little bits of grain going on, but it's not definite. And if you go in with either the Regal Red or the Rich Figure, what it does is it gives you a colour contrast between the two. It'll pick out those flicks. It won't really colour the other, it doesn't colour all the wood down. And then what it does, it just brings the wood, it just makes the wood more exciting. So all you do is give it a shake. It's, everything that's in it is natural. It's not got any varnish, it's natural tree sap resins. It's got natural waxes and natural oils that are in it. Most of the oils that are in it, you can actually, although I don't drink it out of here, they are edible. You know, it's not harsh rubbish. See, a lot of oils nowadays, they're all chemically extracted, which alters the property of the oil. So that's a bit of a plain Babinga, and this is just planed. I've not sanded it. I always say, you know, go down to 600 grit, but it just gives you an idea of all of it just suddenly,
lifting out those flaps.
You know, just bringing it out. You see the dark lines are going darker, but it's not, the problem I find with, you know, like dyes and things like that, or stains, is the whole wood goes dull. You take that life out of the wood. Now, that when I buy the boards in, and I go on someone's hand size. I also go on the thickness that I plane the board down to how long the fingers are. So bits like this that I've brought, just bits of the sides of boards that I've cut down, but to show you what that exact piece of wood goes like, that's off that side. But if you look at that in the light, so you actually looks like you're looking into the wood.
Yeah.
So how many coats of oil are in there?
4.
So 4 is all you need on it.
Yeah, I tend to normally go 4. I mean, if you can go as much as you want. You can start to fill the grain and get it flat, smooth. But what you're not doing is you're not putting it on and leaving it wet, and then putting some more on, because then you'll end up with a finish that don't feel hard. The idea is you put it on, you let, after that half an hour of waiting, it'll start to thicken. As you wipe it off, you're wiping thicker oil into the pores of the grain, and then what I do is once I've wiped it, when I'm getting to my 4th coat, is then I just get my finger, once I've wiped it off and I've left it, I just get my finger and I just go like that, and then let it dry. So you've rubbed in everything that's left, and that's it. So basically, it's so simple, because you just put it on, what don't go in, you wipe off, and that's it. And then the wax, so the wax works to be compatible with, you can basically put it on anything. The only reason I do the wax is because even though they'll say, oh, it's tyrrolene free, tyrrolene is horrendous. It's a horrendous solvent. So they've replaced it with xylene. Xylene is probably one of the most harshest chemicals you can get as a degreasing agent. So I found that my fingers were always cracked, because doing this all the time, you're always cracked. So this, if you have a smell of it, when I first started making saws, I used to bring them into house and polish them, and it used to send, you know, the smell builds up. It's horrendous. So this, it don't give you that chemical smell, and it's mainly the carrier. There's more oil carrier than there is, you know, like a carrier as in a, you know, like a turpentine or something like that. So there's more oil content. So it's a mixture of different waxes and different oils as well. It's different oils that go in it. And the way it works is, it looks fairly hard, almost like soap, but the minute you rub it, it does come off. It's not a paste wax that you're putting on thick and gummy. It's very fine, and you put it on, which I'll show you. So all you're doing with it is you just put it on very, very fine, like that, and then just keep going until it's nearly off, but with the same bit that's got it on. And then ideally you want to leave it 10 or 15 minutes till it's touch dry, but because I've put it on so fine, you'll be able to still buff it now. So and it just gives you that silky, you know, that silky feel. Now the thing is with it, the oil that's actually in the wax then goes hard. So the finish actually gets harder as time goes on. So I coat my chisels in it, and that wax, I might not put any wax on for 6 months. And then I can just go like that with my shirt and it'll be gleaming, because it's still there. We put it over the metal work of the saws so that the saws don't tarnish. You can put it on your tools, your cast iron lathe beds, drill tables, all of that. And it just stops anything, you know, it stops you getting the dampness where you then get a film of rust on everything.
How do you use it for your metal? Because you polish the brass and that's the final stage,
yeah.
isn't it? So how would you use that in that situation?
So all I do is the when I'm doing the brass, I use autosol.
Yeah.
And then once I've finished, I'll then give it a coat of wax. Exactly the same way, put it on really fine and then buff it off. And what it does, it stops your brass suddenly oxidising. So like all them saws, they've been handled all day long. If they were just plain brass, they'd be black and brown and all sorts of different colours where they've been finger marked. So it's just a barrier between that and the tool. And there's some people use, you know, like Camilla oil and things like that. But the reason I don't use it is because it's transferable. So if you coat your tool and it's nice and it stops it rusting, you might have just finished something and you've got a bit of that oil on you, it don't go off. Next minute you're like, oh, flipping it, you know. So I like stuff that don't transfer from one thing to another thing when you're working.
Thank you very much to Shane and Jaq Skelton of Skelton Saws. I hope you can come back for the third and final part of this series, but for the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Mr. Lynn's Workshop.